welcome back. I'm Michael Stamatinos, your host of the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. And if you're new to us, we're crazy passionate about healthcare innovation and adoption. Our aim is to bring real stories about innovation within healthcare, real people that are actually in the trenches getting things done. We've got an amazing action-packed year with some incredible guests that are going to be on. So make sure you check us out, hit the like, subscribe button. But I'm really delighted today to bring James Diaz, CEO of Wellbe. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
So, James, you and I met a long while ago, and I remember sitting in the audience of you giving a pretty amazing chat around patient-centered innovation. Would you mind maybe just kind of giving the audience a little bit of background and a history about you and about what you guys are tackling over at Wellbe?
Sure. Short strokes. I'm an inventive type by nature. I've been that since I had my first opportunity to make something as a kid, and I've always wanted to go and make a difference through building things and creating things. And so I've been through a long career of being involved in introducing new and innovative capabilities into the market. Found my area was in software, and I've been in software for about, I don't know, about 25 years now in various roles, but most excitingly in the product management function. So that gives you a sense of where I come from, the product management side. Also have a strong background in business development. So the marriage of business development and product management is actually an excellent way to come at the question of innovation, because you have to spend a lot of time with customers trying to understand their problems and define and develop them. So we got this company started. This is my sixth. We got this company started with a very interesting premise, and it sounds a little quirky until you hear the rest of the story. But a group of us in the early days were preoccupied with the idea about why healthcare was taking so long to get into the internet space. And this is, in about 2010, where every other industry had already jumped on the bandwagon, and digital transformation was well underway in retail and in hospitality and the airlines and travel. All those things were already doing this. Banking was doing it. Healthcare was way behind. And so when we got in, and this is around 2010, you would naturally wonder, why don't we have these digital tools here? Why aren't patients able to do anything with their providers? Because healthcare is a service industry. So other service industries have already crossed the line. What's taking healthcare so long? So when we got to that point, we kind of decided to come at it from a different point of view. We asked the question, what would healthcare look like if consumers got to invent it? Healthcare is a product of clinical thinkers, people who supply things on the supply side. They are, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, delivery systems, people who make implants. They sort of define what today's healthcare looked like, and the patients, the so-called consumers, were along for the ride. and it certainly looks that way in 2010. It kind of still looks that way today, although I think there are some very interesting shifts taking place in the market, because companies with a very strong consumer mentality are entering the healthcare market, and they're bringing this mindset. But 11 years ago, that's kind of where we started, was what would it look like? And I think that sets the stage for why we were a patient-centered thinker to begin with, because we thought, all right, we'll start with our own imaginations about how care could be for our children and our families and ourselves. And we started in that way. And in fact, we made a commitment very early on in the company, just as an example of this, that we wouldn't hire any clinical people, so that we would never sort of shift into that bias. We would always take this premise from the patient side. And that has kind of been at the heart of our mission for a long time. We try to really start as much as possible from the patient side. Now, that has complicated things, I have to be honest. At the end of the day, hospitals are the ones that engage us. They're our customers. So we have had to balance what our provider community want from the tools and stuff as much as the patient. But we take some pride in the fact that we always try to design from the patient side of it first.
It makes a lot of sense. You talked about you being an inventor, my belief is that, there is quite a bit of a difference between inventing and innovation. Do you how do you define both of those, and where do you see a shift now in being more of an inventor, or are you seeing more of a shift now for you and the organization being more on the innovation side of things?
Yeah, I think as I was coming through my early career, I think the way most people looked at this was there were innovative people in your organizations. They were the inventors that created the post-it note and created the windshield wiper and whatever. There were people that and maybe there were teams in some cases. Today, I think we've shifted to innovation cultures, like whole groups of people and large, organizational approaches to innovation. So there has been a shift. I think the idea of somebody working on a workbench trying to chip away at a thing, or a couple of guys working like Hewlett Packard in the garage working on things, or Jobs and his partner working on things, have given way to whole companies kind of working on things to revolutionize the way consumers do stuff. So yeah, I do see a very big shift, and companies, small and big, are very preoccupied now with how to create that innovative mindset in everybody. In our company, for example, I don't think innovation is the purview of the technical side of the company, the technology side of the company. I think people in customer service can be innovative in many different ways. I think people in sales and marketing need to be innovative in many ways. I mean, I think some of the biggest breakthroughs for companies have often come in areas that have nothing to do with their technology. I like to tell the story about Hyundai. I hope I get the story right, but Hyundai was a so-so brand in the 90s in the United States, maybe mid 90s in the United States. Nobody cared about a Korean car company. What the hell is this thing? We already have enough car companies. And I think it was a very innovative strategy to come up with the the 100,000-mile warranty that they introduced, right? And that was not from a mind of an engineer or a mechanic, somebody on the brakes or something like that. It was effectively somebody in the marketing side saying, we can change the whole perception of this market by introducing a new mechanism called the 100,000-mile warranty. Nobody had done one since then, so that was a breakthrough. So I think innovation is a cultural approach today, rather than having just a few people. I mean, it's great to have a few very high inventive people over there, but innovation also is about executing the stuff. And so you need to put whole teams together to be able to take things from, the seminal idea all the way to commercialization. And as you know, Michael, that is a big lift. I mean, there's a lot of people can tinker in garages that far fewer people that can turn them into commercial successes, to be able to take an idea and actually move it into the market, test it in the market, and get people to adopt it, use it, much less drive, consistent revenues from it. So that takes a team, and that takes a culture.
Well, we know that, look, innovation is a lot of hard work, and your team embodies a culture of innovation. What's it been like to translate some of that innovation into clients that maybe don't have that similar culture? What has that been like? Can you share maybe some stories about maybe clients, customers that you're serving or have served, and you really kind of had to be that bridge? I'm just wondering, what are some of the things that you guys have done to kind of really break the barrier? Because you mentioned earlier that things move a little bit slower, but what have you done to shift things and to move things so that what you guys are doing is embraced better, faster, more efficient?
No, that's actually a very good framing of a question. So we created an innovation process that embraces the healthcare clinical team as a partner in our innovation process. We could not have achieved what we have, and was we're early in our journey, but we could not have achieved it if we had not made that recognition that we had to come together and we had to partner with the clinical teams. And clinical teams, some of them can be inventive, innovative. They obviously have to solve lots of problems that they have on their own. So there's a lot of people that have good, what I would call process thinking, and they come up with new ways to do things. And there are plenty of surgeons and physicians that have invented stuff, nurses that have invented stuff. So I don't want to characterize them as lack of innovation. But not all of them are like that, right? So we have to work across customers who might need our solution or see a need for a solution, and then come to work with them, and they not necessarily have an inherent innovation process that they can turn to. So one of the things that we did over the years was define and develop a co-innovation process with our customers, a methodology, a series of workshops, and a series of engagement methods that we created to essentially unlock their minds and bring them to the table to do this kind of thinking. And I can't say that it's worked with everybody, but we're quite selective about who we pick to do this because we want successful outcomes. But it has worked. When it has worked, it's worked very spectacularly. I have many surgeons over the course of this company's career, our career. Many surgeons have come back and said that was one of the best things that we ever did, because it unlocked new ways to think about this and showed us new ways to. Because one of the things that a lot of clinical teams don't have is they don't have the benefit of that customer perspective, that consumer perspective of the patient that I talked about earlier, right? So one of the things we do is we know our lane.
They don't have the perspective.
No, they see them as patients, right? We see them as consumers. They're actually two different things. They don't necessarily understand them digitally. They don't necessarily want to acknowledge that people want to do things digitally. So we bring in that kind of expertise. We don't come in saying we're the clinical experts. They're the clinical experts. They've got years and thousands of hours over us on that. So I think it's a very complementary approach. We understand the process, we understand the technology, but we also understand their patients from a new type of angle. And a lot of those people find that very refreshing. But then we recognize that they know clinical processes, they know how things have to operate in their health systems, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have a process that brings those two together and marries it. So we do things like journey mapping, where both teams come in and do this. We do some concepting. We are big proponents for design thinking. We have used it for many years. I've been a big proponent of design thinking. I'm sure you've met a lot of others that are using it. So we use that in our own way. It's an adapted version of design thinking, but listening to the customers, talking to their patients, a whole series of things like that we've done over the years. So whenever we come across a novel use case, some new way that somebody's trying to get a problem done in some field that we may not have worked in before, we dust off and bring this methodology to bear and use it, and it's usually quite good. And then the customer is kind of involved in the process, so we also get the buy-in that is very much necessary under those circumstances.
The principles that you're using are timeless. It's kind of like the scientific method.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been around for a long time, and for good reason. Yep. So the foundation that you guys are building is off of something that's really solid. Now, you guys have evolved quite a bit since your inception in the company. You solved quite a bit of problems. And I remember when I had come into your office and I saw a Lego kit,
Yes.
onto your one of your conference tables, and I just kind of made a comment around that. Can you maybe share a range of some of the problems that Wellbe has solved over the years, and where are you landed now, and where do you focus on now?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a crack at what's the significance of the Lego kit. I think we had an important insight relatively early on. A few years into our start, we had this insight that even though you have all these hospitals in the United States, they didn't necessarily all do things the same. There was some would argue there's too much variability. I tend to be in that camp. Too much and unnecessary variability in the systems. But we figured that we couldn't build these systems that had this infinite amount of variability that could do things, because that's a complex. That's not the right way to build a platform, let alone build a business. You can't do it. I mean, if you want to build custom solutions, that's one thing. But we didn't want to be in the custom solutions business. We wanted to find a way to address a nominal amount of variability that was out there without having to start from code every time. And so we took the tack to essentially reimagine our platform as a series of building blocks that could be put together in very many different ways. It took us a number of years to get that right, but I think we are there. We are there now. So what that means is we understood what the fundamental capabilities were that were required to do patient-centered patient navigation, for example, is one application we do quite well. We sort of distilled it down to the key building blocks, and then those building blocks can be put together in many different ways. So if an orthopedic group comes to us and says they want a navigation solution, they want those building blocks to put in one way. If tomorrow a cardiology group comes to us and starts talking to us, and they are, then we can put the same building blocks in a different way. So the building blocks give us configurable a configurable approach to the variability that's inevitably you're going to confront, but we're using standardized things, so we can make the software. We can get to solutions faster. We can get to them cheaper. You're not writing all this code and all the overhead that's associated with managing the code. And we're not unique in that regard, but we solve those problems in the patient navigation arena specifically by taking this type of approach. So we can make very, very complex solutions from the same set of building blocks. It's sort of like you can in a Lego set, right? Once you understand how a Lego set works, you can make many, many things from it. That's the exciting part of where we have landed. Our connected care platform is actually a very modular system that we can go and talk with any specialty about, surgical, medical, anything in between, and create solutions that are, very highly tailored for them. But again, it's a configuration activity and no code written.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting. So let me ask you this, because we've been in some pretty interesting times the last few years.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, access has been restricted in many respects. How has the Wellbe team innovated by still being able to engage with clients, with prospects at a deep level, despite not being able to physically be on site to do a workshop? Can you talk about maybe some of the little wins that you've had in that area?
Yeah, our entire methodology of collaborating with our customers ported very nicely onto the into the digital realm, so that we could do things virtually with our customers. Yeah, there's some shortcomings of not being able to do it at a whiteboard and stuff like that, but we came up with a number of different compensatory methods. I actually have led several novel applications of our platform, new configurations of the Lego kit, if you will, over the last year and a half. Some of them were fairly complex. It took us a little longer maybe than everybody in a jam session in a room to do some things, but we approached it very systematically through a series of workshops. We'd sit, we'd talk, we'd listen. I've gotten good at using a whiteboard on screen, so I could very quickly capture things, relay sketches of them to patients, to our care teams, and get their feedback, and then come back and do another iteration. So we were able to adapt our process, our innovation process in there. So took a little while longer, took a little less efficient, if you will, than it has been in the past. But I've never worried about efficiency as part of the innovation process. Innovation in some ways wants to be a little inefficient, because you never know what new ideas trickle in and what new sparks fly. So you don't want to be too time driven and things like that if you're really seeking a high innovation solution. But we've made it work. We have made it work. I mean, we launched a whole new arena for us in cancer. Again, because we had a very strong partner on the other side who also had a clearer understanding of what goal he was trying to get at, and so we made that work.
That's interesting. And so, I mean, where's the limit? The fact that you can configure so many different things, is there a limit to what you can do, or where do you invest and spend your time? How do you evaluate to assess, hey, this is actually an opportunity that we think is worth it? Can you maybe take me through a little bit of your thought process around that? Obviously not going into anything that's confidential, but to the degree that you can actually share.
Yeah, the building block approach is showing a very high potential. Lots of people come to us and they ask to give us novel solutions, all types of different arenas, and it seems like this approach would work for many, many things. And remember, our building blocks are all optimized for patient interactions online, right? So patient education, patient assessments, patient symptom check-ins. We have a whole series of building blocks that we can put together. Our focal area as a company is improving patient interactions online so that they can move through their journeys of care with online tools. So the platform, fundamental capabilities, we have not yet hit anything. And of course, there's always room for more innovation. So if there's a building block that's missing, or a kind of a certain way that a building block has to work, that's why we have a dev team, right? We can go back and say, all right, this building block has to work in a little bit of a different way. So there's constant innovation. We haven't really hit any sort of walls, if that's what you're asking me. But as a small company, we have to set our own focal points and priorities. So it can't really be everywhere and do everything, right? There is a certain amount of domain expertise, market presence. There's other business considerations that need to be made. Even though the platform is very flexible, we've got to decide what our lane is. And so our lane, we've chosen to be in acute care. So we have, deliberately said some kind of problems, even though we could probably go there and solve them. If we spread ourselves too thin, we don't develop depth and expertise. And so our commitment is towards depth and expertise, so that when we go to a customer, say in bariatric surgery or in orthopedics, they can count on us for that type of depth. That depth is valuable to our customers. So we have chosen to have sort of a more narrow slew of things than having, trying to be all things to all people, because we don't believe that we can get to that domain depth that our clinical partners and our customers expect from us.
What have been some of the surprises over the course of the last few years? Anything that really stands out in your mind that's worth noting?
I think my biggest head scratcher, if you will, is why the adoption of these technologies is taking so long in healthcare. Still taking so long. It's one of the most perplexing thing, and I'm sure there are other CEOs who've launched businesses and come at it with full speed and deep pockets. Lots of money, as you know, Michael, is being invested in healthcare innovation. But I'm just constantly surprised how much of that innovation is getting parked at the door. That's my expression for, you come in, you show it to people, they go, "Ooh, that's fantastic," but it never gets adopted. I'm puzzled by the fact that healthcare 10 years into this, and consumers are far along and doing all these things in amazing places. Healthcare still insists on piloting things. I'm like, really? When do we get past this pilot mentality? Every new customer you go into, they sort of act as though this is the first time this technology has ever been appeared. Even though we show them, hey, for the last 10 years across these 25 customers, there's all the evidence. It seems like the culture is very risk averse. We all know that, but it's that the sort of pilot mentality. So you have a lot of very interesting and exciting innovations that have been developed, tested, have proven to become very robust over the years, that are still getting parked at the door or just getting into pilots. I think very, very few health systems have actually mainstreamed on digital technology. I mean, it took years for the EMR to be embraced. But I was expecting a little faster adoption. I mean, we conceded ground to the EMR, in the early 2000s and mid 2000s. We figured, IT teams and everybody going to be really preoccupied with getting their EMRs in and their ICD-10s and all that stuff. But of late, I'm like, okay, now it's time to do the rest of this stuff, and it doesn't seem to be taking off as fast as possible. There is a small glimmer of hope, I think. I think COVID has effectively kind of put a wake-up call, if you will. Maybe that's being too hard, but they sent some ripples across the leadership in healthcare for them to rethink whether those slow adoption cycles are really the way to go. So I'm hoping that as hospitalizations and other things subside and leaders get their focus back to their strategies, that they take much more serious, give more serious consideration to this. I mean, for example, our platform does care automation very effectively. It actually automates many patient processes, and so it can bring down the burden on a particular staff, right? So we have demonstrated that we can take out hundreds of hours of time, of staff time, doing things like chasing forms and doing patient education. All of that can be done online, and it can be done with these automated workflows that we have. So you look around you today, what is the biggest challenge in healthcare today? It's in the news practically every day. Workforce shortages, workforce disruptions, workforce turmoil. There are teams leadership teams all over the country that are pulling out their hair going, what am I going to do? This is a very expensive and complicated problem. I don't think that those leadership groups have realized that care automation is a proven complementary strategy that can be brought to bear right at this time. Right? This is it. This is the sort of thing. In fact, our company needs to do a better job of waving that flag around like a few others in this space. But that's the kind of thing I think has happened as a result of COVID. I think people are like going to go into a crises, and crises are opportunities for people to make changes and embrace new things. And so, there's a silver lining in all of this COVID complications that we're dealing with. It is that maybe it accelerates adoption of healthcare tech.
Yeah, we hope that there's a little bit of silver lining in here, and that's some of the things that I've been noticing and seeing it. But let's just say, let's wave a magic wand. So James, we put you in a room full of CEOs, hospital CEOs. What's the one thing you're going to tell them?
I would ask him. I would start with a lot of questions because I don't purport to, Michael, I'll be very candid with you. Because I came into the industry as an outsider, I don't have an MD in my name or an RN in my name. I'm, and I just got done telling you that I'm puzzled by this behavior. I remain puzzled by this behavior. So I would like to understand what is it that CEOs and leaders are actually thinking about in terms of their next wave of strategies in care delivery, right? Here's what I'm listening for. I'm listening for whether they're really taking the consumer seriously. I've been talking about this, and even in that talk that you went to, I said a bunch of things that have to do with the consumer, because I'm a big believer that when the revolution in healthcare comes, it will not come from the inside, it will come from the outside, and it will be a consumer-driven revolution. And I know that causes a lot of people to giggle and go, haha, yeah, that'll be the day, because the money is not controlled by the consumer. But there's a lot of companies in the world that know the consumer much, much, much better than the people in healthcare do. I can say that with some certainty, and I've been advocating for years, and many health systems now have people that are addressing consumer issues head on. But as an industry at large, I don't think they take the consumer as seriously as they want to. But Walgreens does, CVS does, Walmart does, Amazon does. And if you've been watching, all of those guys are either slowly or quickly growing their healthcare offerings with consumers. They're all, I just did a little review as part of my annual, let's look at the landscape. And I noted that just about all of them have gone into primary care in some rather fast and remarkable ways. And their idea of primary care is digital is integrated. It's already in. It's not an afterthought. It's not coming later. It's digitally enabled primary care. And there's other companies, Teladoc and others that have been doing this, but you're talking about these companies with very, very deep pockets with very large footprints around the country. What do they have? That's the advantage over the hospital, is they understand the consumer impeccably. They have data on them. They know exactly what they do, what they think, what they buy, how they spend, et cetera. So you got to wonder, with that kind of competency, with that consumer competency and the scale and the footprint that they have and the capital that they have, what are they going to do in healthcare? So my question to the CEOs is, how are you looking at this? I mean, what is your response to this, and how do you want to do this? I mean, there are lots and lots of people like me that are ready to help those leaders in many ways. We've got very powerful tools. We've got methodologies. We can innovate. We don't necessarily have to innovate on their dollars anymore because their predecessors have done it. But I don't have a good answer to that question. I mean, I talk to healthcare leaders every week, and I try to probe for this. I don't get good answers. So I don't know. And maybe this is just because this is the time now. The other people, they've got other things on their mind, but I think other companies are taking advantage of this. They're rolling forward on a lot of their plans. And I think when consumers and employers who pay the bills of those consumers have an opportunity to have primary care delivered much more conveniently, much more cost effectively on the smartphone, I wonder what they're going to choose. I can't imagine that they're going to go, yeah, I'm going to go over there to a place that doesn't have any of that. versus here where it's convenient and it's digital. And if I need to go to a clinic, it's, down the road from me. I mean, these guys are thinking of everything from a consumer's point of view, so it's going to be an interesting next few years.
Time will tell.
Yeah,
Time will
time
tell.
will tell, exactly.
So how can people follow Wellbe's work, and what's tell us a little bit about some of the things you guys are excited about for this year, and the platform's yours to kind of share a little bit more about Wellbe.
Yeah, happy to do so. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we don't spend as much time as we probably should tooting our own horn. We have a lot of little achievements that we get done, and we don't promote it. So we're just getting back on the back into doing some PR and getting the word out there of some of the things that we've been doing quietly in the background over the last few years. But yeah, if you want to check us out, wellbe.me, M-E, for it. So put the money where our mouth is, right? .me. We got this interview started with patient-centered. It was right in our domain name, So go to wellbe.me and take a look at what we're doing. Thank you.
Fantastic. And just, I usually try to end it with one last question is we've got a global audience, many different kind of folks, healthcare leaders, whether on the provider, on the payer side, investment community. If there's one thing that one bit of advice that you can share with our listeners, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it would be in this area that has become my central preoccupation for a number of years, which is adoption, right? I mean, you can be the most innovative person in the world, but if you can't get your technology adopted, you're in trouble, right? It'll stall you as a business. It'll stall your investments. It'll do things. And I think some companies are very good at getting through the adoption barriers. Certain things get adopted faster. Certain things require the federal government to mandate them to get adopted. I think if the federal government had not mandated EHRs, we'd still be talking about them today. So, but I would focus the innovation conversation on adoption. Every time you create a new feature or function or something that you got to think about adoption. And I don't mean in our case, that means adoption by the care teams and the clinical teams, but also by the patients. I will report to you that adoption by patients is so much easier. I mean, patients are taking to this stuff like candy in a store, right? Like the kids in a candy store. But the clinical community, the provider community, very cautious, very reserved, not necessarily, stretching as I might imagine. So adoption has been a challenge. So I would put the centerpiece to any thinking about a business strategy or a company is whether they've figured out the adoption thing. If they haven't figured out the adoption piece, and usually it takes a couple of cycles to do that, then that's really where they should be focused.
James, this has been very, very helpful. So for those in the audience, if you found the content helpful for you, would you mind sharing it on social media? Like I said, subscribe. I'm just so grateful when we can share real people's stories. It makes a difference. We could advance healthcare forward. We know that this is not easy work. This is hard work. And the more innovators or the more innovation-oriented adopters that we can bring into our community, because innovation is not something that's static. It's moving forward. The better off we're going to be. So, James, I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Speak to you soon.
Yeah, happy New Year, Michael. Thank you.
You bet.
Bye-bye.